Hi, so today on From Here to There, we have a little bit of a different episode from a different perspective than we've had on some of our other podcasts. Today, our interview is with Anne. She is the adult daughter of a past client of ours. Like many of our other clients, we worked with Anne and her mother for years before they actually went ahead and actually moved and decided to move into a retirement assisted living community. When we originally met Anne's mother, she seemed very independent. Whether that was reality or not, I'm not certain. But we really kind of thought that her mother would be our primary point of contact, as is the case with really the majority of our clients. But kind of as time, really progressed, we started to realize that her mother was really no longer capable of making the decisions that needed to be made, or kind of putting the steps in chronological order of what needed to happen next to be able to actually make her move. And I think that really kind of what happened is that her mother hit a few health crises along the way that started to impair her cognitively, both in some functions that would have helped her organize a move, and then also in actually coming to the reality that a move was imperative. I will say that ever since the first day I met our client, her daughter Anne was there, and how much Anne loved her mother was very evident, and that she wanted good things for her, but kind of determining what was best for mom, and how to kind of help guide mom to that decision, to not make it feel forced. That's kind of where I think the largest struggle was. When you hear me visit with Anne during this podcast, you'll hear some of those struggles that she went through as well. Really, when we are working with adult children primarily instead of the actual homeowner, there's a struggle with that parent-child role reversal, both with the parent having to kind of relinquish some of that control and understand that it's necessary when it hasn't ever been the case before, and then also for that adult child to also realize that they do need to take the reins, and that they are doing the right thing. So as parents, we know that we're doing the right thing for our kids, and sometimes even if it's a tough decision, I can promise it does not seem to be as tough as a decision as when that role gets reversed, to actually kind of take those reins for a parent. So today, Anne's going to share her story about the process that she went through and the emotional journey she went through, and her family, as well as they started to get mom moved from here, which was mom's house of many years, to there, which in this case ended up being an assisted living and later an Alzheimer's secure facility instead. We just thought that this would be kind of really relevant right now, with everything going on, where we're all kind of in our homes for better or worse, having to really, a harbor in place kind of. And so I've talked to a few adult children who really feel helpless right now. They have an adult parent, that's in a high risk category, whether that's because of health or age, but more likely than not because of both combined. So they know that mom and dad are at home, and they feel like they can't really be that support, bringing the grandkids over and coming and bringing food all the time like maybe they were before. So there's kind of I guess this all feels a little more serious in those circumstances when they really are worried about that parent that is living alone. Another couple that we're working with had planned on moving in late March, early April from their home. Well, we know what happened in our country over the past month or two. And so that move has been put on hold for a few months. But I just found out that actually her husband is in the hospital with some heart complications. So she's trying to manage the house by herself and trying to safely get to the grocery store and cook meals for herself. She wants to visit her husband in the hospital, but the hospital is not allowing those type of visits. So it's a really tough struggle that I'm seeing, that, kind of some of that jargon that's going around is together, apart. But in their circumstances, it feels more just like a lot of isolation and loneliness. And so really, we just wanted to do this podcast to kind of talk about maybe when someone does need to step in and it's time to really make that decision before things get worse and before decisions sometimes have to be made for mom or dad. So if you are listening and you are very independent and considering this type of move, I just encourage you to still listen to this episode, even if it doesn't apply to you, but to understand kind of what your kids may have to deal with if you don't make some of those decisions for yourself. So not a scare tactic at all, just a different perspective. And if you are an adult child of someone that you are thinking of encouraging a move for, I really hope that Anne's words will resonate with you. And feel free to reach out to us. Anne has graciously said that she would be happy to answer any personal questions that any listeners have for her directly as well. Thank you. Hi, Anne. Thank you for being with us here today. We are so excited that you volunteered to be on our podcast. Every one of our client stories are so different, but really it seems like they all have a lot of common threads in them. And so I'm just hoping that your story will resonate with some people. It was really abundantly clear to me whenever I met you that you really wanted the best thing for your mom, and I know the rest of your family did too. But it didn't come without any challenges along the way. There were certainly some challenges as well in that, being able to move her from her home she had been in for a long time and into a community where she'd be safer and you didn't have to worry so much about her. So I just really kind of wanted to start with your background, how this all came to be. So if you could just tell me a little bit about your parents and their living situation and health kind of before I entered the picture.
Okay. My parents had moved around quite a bit. My dad was in the Air Force, and they hadn't moved maybe as much as some service people. My dad was fortunate that he got 3 consecutive permanent change of station assignments, all in San Antonio. Mm-hmm. So we moved there in the late, like 66. And so I went through grade school, high school there, and all my siblings, we all went to the same school. So I think he retired in 1984. Mm-hmm. And he kind of hung around the house a little bit, and their health had been, average for old people.
Right.
And which now I'm one of those. But he...
no, I'm going to deny that.
He sat around the house for a while. My mom finally said, "You need a job." Mm-hmm. Because he was just in his 50s and late 50s, and he was like making her nuts. So yeah. She said, "You're too young to quit working. You've got to keep working." So he found a job in the state of Virginia. He was the director of the Bureau of Chemistry for the state of Virginia for 15 years, and he retired from that job. And they really liked Virginia, but they were like all the way across the country. And right. It took all day, even from Houston. It took all day to get to Richmond because of the flight connections. Mm-hmm. So we kind of worked on him to move back to this side of the country, this side of the Mississippi. Mm-hmm. And I have one sister living in Denver. There's 4 of us children, and I'm the oldest. My brother is 18 months younger than I am, and bless his heart, he grew up with just 3 girls, and so he's my sister Mary is 6 years younger than I am, and my sister Amy is 10 years younger, so there's a good spread there. Mm-hmm. My sister Amy and my brother live in San Antonio by my parents. And so that was a factor in them coming back to San Antonio. They liked it. They had lived there, of course, for 20 years when we first moved there. And they liked the community. They liked, all the service people there. That was just something. My dad was into American Legion and all that good stuff. So he had, built-in organizations to belong to.
It was a good fit for everything.
It was a good fit for them, and my brother and my sister were there, and so when I would come, I live about 4 hours. Since I live close to Houston, it was about 4 hours to get there. My one sister that lived in Denver didn't come as often, but it was easier for her to get a quick flight from Denver to San Antonio. It wasn't a major,
right.
ordeal. So that was why they chose to move back to San Antonio. My sister in Denver hard for them, but they grew up in Montana and they said, no, no more snow. We're done.
Right.
So,
Yeah. I agree. I've been in Texas my whole life, and I don't do well with snow unless it's the kind of snow we get in San Antonio, right? Where it's just
yeah,
a few
right.
hours every 20
Yeah,
years.
I'm not even good when it gets below about 50, but that's
Right.
another story. They built their house in 2004, I believe. That's what they called their forever house. It was the first house they had ever built together. And my mom and dad had always been partners. They'd always been a pair. Of course, they had their ups and downs like everybody else did, but they were always, had each other's back. So that was what they planned on living in their forever house until they died.
Mm-hmm.
Well, unfortunately, my father passed in 2014, so he got his wish. It was very unexpected, and it was really hard on Mom.
Right.
After my dad passed, we began to realize that Mother was not as functional as we thought she was. She was having trouble doing a lot of things, tasks that she had always done before, keeping up with appointments and even, remembering like going to the grocery store or, things like that. Right. So we kind of were getting suspicious that maybe my dad had covered up a lot of stuff and we weren't aware of it until he passed and wasn't there to, run interference for her anymore.
Yeah. And we kind of see that a lot, that sometimes the first signs that someone maybe can't live at home anymore is when a spouse passes. And sometimes there is that cover up, or sometimes that spouse doesn't even realize they are covering up. They've just, like you've said, been a pair for so long, and you don't really realize how much that person was doing.
Mom had always, they had I don't know, maybe it was not unusual, but they communicated a lot by kind of verbal sparring with each other. My dad would say, well, don't forget you've got to do this. And she'd tell him, well, I wish you'd just quit telling me what I'm supposed to be doing. I can manage it, and
right.
kind of.
But those were the reminders maybe she needed.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. My brother took it upon himself. He would go over there every day, check on Mom, make sure, he'd take her to the grocery store if she needed it, made sure she had food. When he first started going over there every day after work, she would cook dinner for him and they would visit for a while and then he would go on home.
Right.
And he did that for 3 years. Over time, she got to where she wasn't so much on cooking anymore. So my brother would cook for her. Mm-hmm. And that kind of even got to where she was not really able to do that anymore. And she kind of got hostile about my brother doing things. And it just, we realized that her dementia was really progressing.
Yeah. And that's a lot for your brother to have to take on, managing his household, plus trying to cook for her and dealing maybe with some rebuttals with all of that too.
She wanted him to move in with her. And of course he wouldn't do it. He's not married, but he did have his own house and things. And he knew that would probably not do very well.
Right.
None of us would have been able to move in with Mother and live to tell about it.
And that's kind of what we see. We get that question sometimes, or that proposal. And I would say so in 13 years, I've had one time that actually worked out where, well, we'll see, it's still in process, but normally that's just a Band-Aid on the situation. Mom moving in with the child or child moving in with mom is kind of a Band-Aid type thing. If it's needed for a couple of months before something else can happen, but normally from what we've seen, it's a disaster for everybody involved.
Yeah, it is. And that became a rift too between my mom and my youngest sister, Amy. She decided, well, maybe Amy should move in with her. Well, Amy had a husband and a child and a job. Mm-hmm. And Amy's like, no, I can't do this. Mom's, I'll pay you. Well, that was, so Amy's like, no, you're not going to pay me. And but she knew that that would not work any better, her moving in with Mother, than even if she had the opportunity, if she didn't have her own family and things, she knew that was not going to be a good idea. So,
all of that was kind of what made you and your family start to realize that maybe Mom living at home wasn't going to be able to continue.
We knew it was a matter of time that we were going to have to move her somewhere, but it was going to be, I think the hardest thing was broaching the subject to her, because she was so fiercely independent that she knew exactly what she wanted, and she would stick up for herself and tell you.
Mm-hmm.
And her best rebuttal was, well, I'm still your mother. So, I mean,
right. Yeah.
You know,
and that's a hard one to come back from. And that
she wanted to make all the rules, and we didn't really have much leg to stand on.
Right. Yeah. And that reversal, that child parent reversal is just can be really hard. So, how was it whenever you had to actually introduce the idea of maybe moving? Was she receptive to the idea of moving? And
she kind of was like, well, maybe someday. But to her, if we talked about assisted living, even though we would talk to her about what it actually entailed, she had the idea that it was a nursing home. Right. And those nursing homes of old days were not very palatable. And I don't blame her. I wouldn't want to live in one of those either. Right. And I said, I finally was able to get her to say, well, I said, let's go look. And you can ask them all the questions you want, and we'll just look and see. So when the time comes and you're ready to move, you'll know what to expect. And I said, because she had the idea that they were going to tell her like when she had to get up, when she had to eat breakfast, when she had to go to bed, when,
she couldn't leave. Yeah. All those things. Mm-hmm.
And, she wanted to watch her TV. And one of the things was we went around and around with, she wanted hearing aids. We got her hearing aids, and she couldn't ever keep up with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so
and they're very pricey.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. After about the third pair, we said, well, maybe, I don't know.
Right.
But she would have her TV up so loud to listen. And she's like, well, I have to have it up, and nobody's going to want to hear that. And so I can't live anyplace else because I'll bother people.
Right. Just trying to put up roadblocks. Yeah.
She was the best at it. And I will tell you, just as kind of a disclaimer, my mother had the best sweet little old lady I could ever see. Everybody that met her thought she was just adorable, and they just thought she was so sweet and so nice and so wonderful. And they didn't see, I'm glad that everybody thought that way about her, because
it'd be better than the reverse, right?
Kids that, you send them to somebody's house and they're great, and then they come home and they rip things.
We have some of those. Yeah. I've had to ask the teacher, are we talking about the same kid here?
Yes, I've done that with mine too. So it was, I would go after a while. When I was still working. And so I would go to my brother's, like I'd take a Friday and a Monday off and go spend 4 days with her and give him a break. And then I started going during the week so that I could do a lot of the appointments, like taking her to the doctor and things like that, because he was having to take off work to do it. And he had a really great boss, and he had a really good situation that he was able to do that, but he did still need to get his work done. So
and that's great that you can do that. I mean, there's families that we visit with, and that's just not possible. I mean, if we were talking about your sister in Denver, she couldn't just fly in for a doctor's appointment or anything.
And I retired in the fall of 2015. And so I would go and spend like a whole week with her. I'd go like Sunday or Monday and come home Friday or Saturday and give my brother a really good break. And because by then she had started getting really, I guess angry is the word, because nobody would move in with her, and her life was changing. And we kept telling, the first thing I would have to do is things like I'd get to her house and she'd go, I need to go shopping. And I'd say, what do you need, Mom? I need some clothes. I don't have any pants. So I would go through the house. She would do laundry, and she would hang things over chairs instead of hanging them up in the closet. And then, so she had pairs of pants all over the house. So I'd go gather up all her pants and put them in her closet. Well, I didn't know I had so many pants.
Right.
So it was that kind of stuff. And going to the grocery store was a big deal for her. And she liked to read labels and shop and all that. That drove my brother berserk. So he was like, go in, get what you need, get out. And of course, he'd worked all day and he didn't want to spend 2 hours in the grocery store with her.
And and men sometimes want to go in and out on the shopping and browse, but right. But I'm sure a lot of that kind of progressed as some of her memory, cognitive functions it was getting worse, like the pants thing. That's a occupational error kind of.
Yeah, she, and so it was really hard. And she kind of started getting more and more ugly to him because he'd try to have patience, but sometimes after you do that a lot, and she started getting pretty rude with him about, well, you just don't care about me and you just want to put me away and you just want my money. And she couldn't, and we knew she wasn't paying her bills. We put most of her bills on auto pay and she would tell people, oh, I did that. And we're like, no, you didn't.
Well, and just kind of to interject for some of our listeners that maybe are going through a similar thing, that caregiver burnout that your brother was experiencing, and I'm sure by the end of your trip you were experiencing too, is just so common, really, no matter what the personality is of the person you're caring for. It's so much. And a lot of times we see that the people that are stepping in, like you and your siblings trying to step in, you can't even take care of your own needs anymore because you're just taking care of their needs. And when you don't have that appreciation, because they're struggling too with losing this control of the checkbook and control of going to the grocery store, it's hard. And then you get this person that's not maybe being their best self.
Yeah. Well, when the worst came when I took her to a geriatric doctor, and the doctor finally said, you don't need to be driving anymore. She would get lost. She couldn't find her way out of the subdivision that she'd lived in for 10 years and things like that. So she's like, I can still drive. It's not a crime to get lost. Well, no, it's not a crime, Mom, but you don't get to where you're going. And so anyway, my brother did physically take her keys, which is what tipped her over the edge, I think, with him. And he could do nothing right after that.
Right. Because he was now threatening her independence in some way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
so did you and your siblings, did you all kind of grouply all feel the same as far as that she needed to move from the house?
At first, as soon as my dad died, my sisters were like, she needs to go in a nursing home. She needs to go in assisted living. And my mother's she was still functioning fairly well at that point. My brother's like, well, I'll come by and check on her and every day and see how she's doing. And she could still do her laundry and she was still cooking for herself and things like that. So she was still doing okay. And he was happy, he was willing to do that. As time went on and she started kind of sinking a little bit, then he and I had talked about it, and my mother had started getting to the point where she was saying really hurtful things to us. And I think it was mostly she was scared and she realized her life was changing and she didn't have any control over it. So all she could do was lash out at those of us who were there with her. My parents always being together, my dad had some outside friends, but mother never really cultivated any. She would do some things with dad, but she never really had any of her own friends that would come and visit or that she could go do things with. So she was very isolated, and all she saw was my brother and Fox News, and that was it.
Yeah, and that's tough.
The same person that will make you crazy.
and kind of, with what's going on in our world right now and everything with all this COVID-19, we're seeing even more that isolation. There's kind of a big glaring light on what that isolation looks like, especially because sometimes even the adult children are saying, I really shouldn't be going to go and see my parents. Right. Because I am out doing things in the community and things like that. And of course, the high risk category, that a lot of our over 75 clients are in, it's so hard, and that loneliness becomes so evident. So even if she had a social circle, it would have been vanished during this time. And we were seeing a lot of that.
She had a neighbor that she could talk to, but the neighbor had a whole list of her own health issues and she wasn't like a come over and have coffee and we'll visit kind of neighbor. She would, if mom needed something, she was glad to help her, but she didn't and she really wasn't able to do a lot of, she couldn't drive herself and things like that. So,
right.
But she was really helpful, like when, like during the day when my brother wasn't there, or in between times I came, she would text or call us and say, your mom's done this, or, we haven't seen your mom for a
Right.
few hours. And so she would kind of help check on her, if that was something.
Yeah. So you're in this situation where you guys are all pretty much the adult children are all pretty much on board that this move has to happen. You have mom that's resistant to this, and you're kind of in a gridlock situation. So at that point, whenever that move was completely inevitable and you knew you had to take a next step, I mean, how do you take that next step when you have mom saying, I am not really excited about you moving me, and everyone else seeing that it's needed?
First of all, because mom had gotten so really rude or awful, ugly with all of us, my two sisters couldn't handle it, and they backed off. Mm-hmm. They were supportive of what Mike and I did, but they were like out of the picture. Mm-hmm. Now, when it came time to clean mom's house out, my sister Mary came from Denver, and God bless her, because I would have never gotten that house cleaned out.
Right. It was a good sized house too. So,
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they'd been married for 60 years. So, mm-hmm. You know how much, and my dad never threw anything away. Right. There's every scrap of paper he ever owned.
Mm-hmm. Every bank statement and
yes.
Military discharge papers.
1950, yes. But anyway, so, that was hard with that, because then it kind of fell to Mike and I to do what needed to be done. And the point kind of came when mother was telling me, I want to stay in San Antonio. I love San Antonio. I think it's great. And then she says, your sister, Mary Beth, just keeps pushing me to move to Denver. And she wants me to live in her basement like it was some dank, dark thing, which it was really a nice apartment in her, in her basement, right. With a kitchenette and the whole 9 yards. Right. But so then she would tell Mary Beth, well, yes, I can't wait to get to Denver. It's just going to be wonderful there. And I need to get out of San Antonio and just get away, because Mike just keeps trying to run my life. And so finally, Mary Beth and I talked, and we were like, because we were getting these mixed signals, and finally we had a conversation, and we realized that mom was doing this. And so I finally talked to mom, and I said, look, mom, whatever you want to do, if you want to go live in Denver, I will move mountains to make it happen for you. Mm-hmm. If you want to stay here, that's great. We'll make that happen. But you have to make up your mind and tell me what you want to do. And she took this deep breath, and I said, you're telling Mary Beth this, and you're telling me that. And I said, we need to know what the true story is. What do you really want? And she says, you girls need to quit talking to each other. You're just confusing me.
Yeah. Just kind of displacing that confusion.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was kind of a turning point when we knew that there was not going to be any straight answers out of mom. And
right.
I kind of got to the point, at first I was very angry at my sisters for backing off, and not so much Mary Beth, because she didn't live there, but Amy was in town, and it just really aggravated me that she wouldn't even call mom, she wouldn't come and see her or anything. And then I finally got to the point where I realized that, I couldn't, all I was doing was raising my blood pressure over it. Right. And I really couldn't control what she was doing. So all I could control was I did what I knew was the right thing to do for me and for mom. And I just let her go. She had her own things that she needed to take care of, and I couldn't really judge her because I wasn't living her life. So right. It really took a big load off me when I let go of that, because that wasn't something I could control. Family member that's not wanting to help, then let them go do their thing. You do what you know is the right thing to do.
And that's not infrequent. A lot of times when I'm really just working with adult children and not the senior that's making that move, a lot of times there is one child or two children that kind of have to take the lead. And I think that sometimes, and I could be wrong, sometimes it's a busyness issue and that kind of thing. But sometimes I think it's a little sad. It's a little depressing to see that mom or dad now are not able to fully function on their own anymore. And
Yeah.
so sometimes it's kind of like I'm going to go hide and put my head in the sand because I can't deal with all the emotion this is bringing up.
Well,
So,
and mom, her ultimate to really get, when she was really, really angry, she would say, "You're not my child anymore. You can't call me mom anymore." And having raised two teenagers, I'm like, okay, well, whatever. And I've heard this before.
Right.
Our two sisters just it just hurt their hearts horribly because they had not, Mary Beth had a teenager, but apparently, I don't know if I guess she never went through that, or it was different with her mom or something. I don't know, but they couldn't deal with that because mom had done that to both of them, and she'd done it to all four of us at some point.
Right.
Mike and I were like, well, okay, you can say that, but we still love you and we're still going to take care of you.
We'll talk in a few days. Yeah.
Yeah. My sisters were like, oh, she doesn't love me anymore. And
right.
now we're out. So whatever.
Right.
But, we tried. You had recommended Jill Piazzi of Gray Matters to us, and she came over, and we spent a lot of time on the telephone with Jill. And she came over and talked to mom. And of course, mom was her sweet little old lady, and worked on trying to find some help to come in for like the afternoon, or 4 or 6 hours a day, and make sure she had lunch, and take her to the beauty shop if she needed it and things. Well, then one of the ladies said, she asked me, she said, well, what if your mom wants to drive? And I said, well, you really, you can drive her car. And we checked, the insurance would cover it. And I said, but I really would prefer that you drive. Well, so that's what she told mom. Sure, your daughter told me I had to drive. Well, that made mom mad. So anyway, we went through 6 caregivers in about 2 weeks because we would have them like for one day and she wouldn't like them. There was one lady who came one day and just was, after that, never available again. So, Jill tried, and she kind of went through like 2 or 3 agencies that she knew of. And we finally said, it doesn't matter who you get. She's not.
It's maybe not the caregivers.
We were pretty sure that was the case, but we gave it a try. We felt like we had to try that.
Right. And did you get any support at all from her doctor about making the move or anything?
The doctor she was real good about, she did help in that she kind of guided us. Like when we started, after this, we started kind of pursuing, checking into what it was going to be to obtain guardianship of mother, because we knew that was not an easy thing to do. And it was a big legal step, somewhat expensive legal step. But so I talked with, and it was hard to talk to the doctor. I'd have to call her because when I was with mom, mother was very defensive about, well, it's about me. Why is she talking to you? She needs to be asking me the questions. She was, she still had that sense of.
And she's trying to protect her image in front of the doctor. And
the doctor. So we finally got a name from the doctor of a geriatric psychiatrist in San Antonio there's a court form that has to be filled out, an evaluation. And I forget what it's a form that they do really extensive, like dementia, Alzheimer's testing.
Right. And, they don't want to inappropriately give a guardianship that's not needed. So they're trying to.
And they are the rules about guardianship are very clear and they're very detailed about what you can and cannot do.
Right.
And so it's something that, it's a serious matter, and you can't always find. I had looked up lawyers, and there were several that, this is really recommended. And I think Jill had recommended one to me, and the good ones, we can maybe set up an appointment for 6 weeks from now. And I'm like, no, we can't wait 6 weeks.
We have an issue. We have a safety issue here. Yeah.
So I think I finally was able to get her tested in January of 2017. And that was what I told her, was because she was like, well, why didn't you just put me away if you don't want to deal with me or whatever? And we're like, well, Mom, maybe it'd be better. And I tried to emphasize the social aspect. She'd have somebody to talk to. You wouldn't have to cook. You could just go eat.
Right.
They come and, clean your apartment for you or whatever. And she always had a reason why that wasn't. First, she had a dog, and we managed to, I told her, well, I'd take care of the dog. And then I did find a home for it later. But that was one of her, she kept holding up. She had her dog, she had to have her dog.
Right.
And she wanted, a lot of the places we looked at had independent living as well as assisted living. And she was insisting that she could do independent. Well, they would talk to her and realize she needed to be in assisted living. And so
I think you went through that. I think I remember that, right? There was one that.
The Air Force Village, I think it's called Blue Sky now.
Blue Skies, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And they wouldn't approve her for independent living. That really.
That's a knock. Yeah.
That really made her really mad.
Right. So how did you decide exactly where to move her when that independent living at Blue Skies wasn't going to be a possibility? So we started
doing a tour. We looked online, and I'd have her sit with me, and I'd look on the computer, and I'd say, oh, this place, what do you think about this place? And she'd like, yeah, that looks pretty good. So we made a list of about 6 places that were kind of in her general area of town.
Right.
And but it really made that much difference to her, but she had some sort of input. And one of the ones that we went to was, and I think we made a list of 6 of them. And there was a couple of them that we looked at that we just right off the bat, neither one of us liked them.
Right.
We went to the Villa de San Antonio seminar that they had. We just happened to luck into that, and you were there, thankfully. And and we looked in there. We looked at their independent living, and the cottages were really nice. Mm-hmm. But she's like, well, they're just so small. She was something like her house. And I'm like, no, Mom, you don't need that much space.
Right.
Well, that was her. So, I'm always grateful that I ran into you, because you have been, you were a great source of information and who to call and resources like Jill. Mm-hmm. And things like that in moving, when we need to have some things moved, you knew who could do it. Not a big, huge moving company, but there was somebody specialized in
those type of moves. Right. They're not going to just pack every single thing in the house and move everything else in the house.
And as it turned out, and then you also got me hooked up with a lady, I think her name was Tracy, that helped me. She took me to an assisted living place, and she took me to some home-based places, and I realized that assisted living would be better for Mom than a home-based. Mom was having trouble with navigating, getting lost easily, and I knew that in a big house like those home-based ones, they had like a bathroom down the hall. Well, if she had to navigate down the hall, that wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
So, excuse me, we went to an assisted living place, and it was pretty new, I think 3 years old. They were, hardwood floors. It was gorgeous. She had a nice big room, her own bathroom. Mm-hmm. She lasted about a week there. Mm-hmm. When I first took her, she said she would try it for a month. And then we got there, and she's like, I don't think I can do this. I don't want to do this. And I'm like, well, how about 2 weeks? Well, maybe 2 weeks. And then as I started unpacking her stuff, she's like, no, I want to go home. At this point, I had already, we had a court date by this time. This was the end of March in 2017. We had a court. So I knew that if I could get her there, mm-hmm. and hopefully do it willingly, that it would be a lot easier. And once she got there, I could make her stay there.
The guardianship would kick in at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We moved her in on a Monday. Court was on Wednesday, She managed at that assisted living place. They did have a front door that you could come and go, but they had an alarm bracelet that they put on their residents that if they got too close to the front door, it would sound an alarm, and they would come check and see who was going out or whatever. Somehow mom managed to ditch the bracelet. They don't know how. They could never find it. I wouldn't put anything past her because she could be pretty resourceful when she wanted to be. And so she got out in the street. It was on a busy street. And she got out in the middle of the street, and she was out there, and the administrator said she was like yelling, "I want to go be with my husband," and and that kind of stuff. So they sent her off to one of the hospitals for psychiatric evaluation because they felt like she was maybe suicidal at that point. And so after they put her in there overnight, and God bless my brother, we had decided that I would be the guardian. He had done his 3 years, and he was, was kind of
getting out of the service there.
He was burned out, and he said, "Look, I'll, and that's like I said, that's why I left her in San Antonio because of that. He was there in an emergency, and so he would hold the fort down until I could get there." And he said he knew he could handle anything for a couple hours, a few hours.
Right.
Till, So he dealt with her on that, and of course, she did her sweet little old lady thing, and the psychiatrist at the hospital said, "Oh, she's fine. She just wants to go home." I'm like, "Oh, it's not that simple."
Yeah.
So they, the assisted living facility had made arrangements with Arden Courts Memory Care to have her moved in there. And I thought, well, we'll get her there, and then we'll see how it goes. And maybe if I need to find a different place, I can, but I'll have time to do that. But that was really a fortunate stroke. Those people were so caring over there. And it was even more apparent when she was towards the end, and I had more of them come in and tell me funny stories of things mom said or did. And it made me know that they appreciated her, warts and all, for who she was.
And just, to clarify, in case someone's not super familiar, assisted livings can help with all kinds of physical like bathing and medication management, but they're not really set up to be truly like a secured community as far as all the doors are locked and everything.
Yeah, memory care, there was 2 locked doors that she had to get through.
Right.
To get out the front.
And so that becomes an appropriate option whenever somebody is at risk for wandering, or sometimes there's even behavioral issues that are going on with different people. And really, assisted living, we do see some impairment cognitively for sure in assisted living, but once it progresses, or there's those things where they're just simply not safe anymore, that's when a place like Arden Courts becomes appropriate. So
and that's kind of where I really felt she needed to be at first, but the evaluation that the doctor did had said he didn't recommend a locked facility at that point. Again, little old lady was really sweet and everything.
Right.
I will say that what helped our situation immensely is my dear father had planned ahead and left my mother in a very nice financial position that we were not having to, worry about how we were going to do this.
Right. Very expensive. Yeah. Even assisted living can be very pricey.
Her last year, I had a companion come in for 4 hours a day because she still needed some social interaction. And most of the people in there, a lot of them, you couldn't have a conversation with. Bless their hearts, they just weren't capable. And so she would talk to the aides and stuff. Well, they had jobs to do, and they would talk to her as much as they could, but they still had jobs to do and needed to be busy. So I had a companion come in 4 hours a day in the afternoons, and they would spend time with her if they wanted, if she wanted to go to activities, or they'd encourage her, just somebody to talk to that could have a conversation. She loved to talk about cooking, and she loved to talk about kids and raising kids and stuff, because that had been her whole life, was her family.
Right. Yeah. And you kind of have to, I think with a lot of this, you can't predict how things are going to go. You didn't predict that she was going to walk out of the assisted living into the middle of the street, and they didn't either. And then, in the memory care, just kind of having to adapt to that and say, maybe she could have a little more social interaction than what was there, but she's not safe to go back to assisted living. So you're kind of stuck in between the two.
Yeah, I think that the memory care was pretty much where she needed to be. One of the things that happened along the way when we were trying to get her situated was when we first started working on guardianship, the doctor said it will help if you get adult protective services involved. Mm-hmm. And she gave me the number for that. And so I called him and I told him, I said, Mom's not, she's not functioning well, she's not eating, and all this. And so they, that kind of opened a case. And so I left my mom a card with that number on there. And I said, if Mike doesn't bring you groceries, which I knew he did, and I would cook for her and put individual servings in the freezer, and she forgot they were there and she wouldn't eat. So I told her, I said, here's a number. If you think things are going badly, because, if you want to tell somebody, this is Adult Protective Services. So she called him a couple times, and the first time they sent a sheriff's officer out to check out the situation. And she's like, I don't know where my kids have been. I haven't seen them for months. And I don't have any food. Well, he looks in a refrigerator and you couldn't get another thing in that refrigerator.
Right.
So she gave him my brother's number. He got it off the caller ID, I think, on the phone. And he called my brother, and my brother said, okay, here's the caseworker's name. This is what's going on.
Right.
That kind of, all that did was really cement that she was really not capable of living.
Right. That was not a good situation. And I mean, really, you guys, and her especially, were also lucky that you were as involved as you were, because there's so many people that the kids really aren't visiting. The kids don't know they should be visiting that frequently, or they're not able to. And then we have some kind of tragedy involving EMS and a neighbor that noticed, we there's lots of those stories too. So it's really fortunate that you guys were as involved as you could be, even though you were getting so much resistance. So did she, I know that I had come over a couple times when she was still living in the house, and we had talked about selling the house, and she was her very polite and welcoming self with me and going to do all the things that I had suggested, but they didn't happen,
Right.
And so I think we had kind of talked about some clients want to stay in the house when it goes on the market. Some clients decide to move out. We normally recommend to move out, which is what you guys did. So is that kind of, are you glad that that's what happened? I mean, I can't imagine.
Yeah, because that mother did not, as a matter of fact, bless her heart, she passed on not knowing that I ever sold her house. She always had the idea that she was going to get out of that place and go home.
Right.
And so I would just tell her, well, when the doctor says you can go home, then we can go home, knowing that was really not ever going to happen.
Right.
And so that was that. But I don't think it would have. And when I tried to kind of help her, say, do you want me to help you, start in this room? No, I don't feel like it today.
Right. So. But I mean, what a blessing that you guys did give her by kind of joining her journey and saying, sure, you can go back whenever the doctor says, because we have a lot of adult children who try and say, now, Mom, you remember we sold the house, and
that is one of the best pieces of advice I got from somebody that was a caregiver, and she told me, she said, they have their own reality. It may be 50 years ago, but they have their own reality. They're not ever going to live in your reality again.
Right.
And it's not going to hurt you to live in theirs for a few minutes.
Right.
And I know, like, when I would go to see her, sometimes she'd say, oh, we need to go to the grocery store and get something for dinner, and your daddy won't care what we fix. Well, number one, Daddy wasn't there anymore, and number two, we were not going to the grocery store.
Right.
I would just tell her, well, we don't need to go right now. We'll go later. It's early in the afternoon. We'll go later.
Right.
Okay. And then she'd forget.
Right. And I, in 2000, from like 2003 to 2006, I worked in a assisted living and Alzheimer's care community. And we saw that a lot. We would see someone say, now where's my husband? And why isn't he home yet? And what is he doing? And you don't fix the situation. You just say,
Yeah.
no, he called. He said about another 20 minutes and he'll be back, but we'll give him what for being late when he gets,
Yeah, we've had some of those, well, your daddy, he's just busy traveling. Because my dad, at one point in his career, he did travel a lot. And so she'd be like, oh, your dad must be on one of his trips again or something. And, we'd like, yeah.
And then, so when she moved out, of course, she couldn't take very much of what was in her house. I'm sure you guys might have taken a few things that you and your siblings may have taken some items. But was it hard on you all emotionally with, I know you had an estate sale. And so was that hard? Because a lot of times we find, I have somebody right now, poor thing. I was working with her kids and she said, my kids are going to distribute everything in the house. Well, the kids' intention was to estate sale everything in the house. I can tell you right now that was about a year and a half ago. And that house is just sitting there full of the stuff because the kids don't know what to do. And mom thinks everything's of value. And,
Well, and with the guardianship, we were told we could keep things that were family items like mom's jewelry, pieces of furniture that had been in the family. We had like some end tables and a sofa table that had been my grandmother's, and we could keep those. The things that were in the house, and when my parents built that house, they bought, when they moved from Virginia, they basically left everything there and bought new stuff when they came to San Antonio. So all the stuff that was in that house, we didn't have any emotional attachment to any of that because it was not something that we grew. My sister took a couple of the tables that had belonged to my grandmother. We each took, there was some dishes that had, I think my brother has my grandma's china because none of us girls wanted it.
Right.
We didn't want to let it go. And so there was some things like that. We did keep her good jewelry. My sister, Mary Beth, and I went through the jewelry and kept all her good jewelry. And my brother got that appraised as part of the estate. But basically, it really wasn't that bad. There was a bazillion boxes of pictures that we had to do.
Right. That's tough. Yeah.
That was, and mostly what I did is in the old days, there was probably, if there was one picture, there would be 13 of the same thing because just in case it didn't turn out, they'd take more.
Yeah. Now we delete those, but yeah.
And so there's a lot of them. There were pages of albums that I would just get my cell phone and take a picture of that page of the album and then go, if anybody wants these pictures, they can have them. But and so there was a lot of that. But we, and then I think basically there wasn't much in the house that other than a few pieces of furniture. And there were some keepsakes my dad had that we kind of distributed. And it was things that, it meant something to somebody. And so they took it and nobody else wanted it anyway. So we didn't really have any big issues over dividing stuff up. And most of it was stuff they had bought when they got to San Antonio, and we didn't really think to us. So we just,
and you just had a professional estate sale company come in.
Yes, a really good one. Kendra came in, and her ladies were amazing. I just got out of their way.
Yeah, they are. They know how to set it up. My husband and I actually bought a few of your Christmas things that were.
Oh yeah. Oh
yeah, we did.
And that was another good thing too, was like I was kind of sitting there like, well, now what do we do next? I've got to sell the house. And you contacted me at just the right time because I was like, well, I need to do this, but I wasn't like really thinking about it. And you said, oh, well, now how about, when you think you might be ready to start showing the house? And I'm like, oh my God. So that kind of got me, pushed in the right direction. Kendra came and talked to me about the estate sale, and she laid everything out how it needed to be. She had we had a contract, and everything was very open above board. She gave me an itemized list of everything she sold, what she sold it for. We had agreed on some extras, like they packed up all the leftovers and donated them to a veterans organization. One of the ladies cleaned the house. Those were extras that I was more than happy to pay for. And so, it was well worth the money, because that was a huge amount of stuff that I was not looking forward. And I know people that have had their own estate sales, and they said, oh, it was just
a disaster.
That's like, beat me with a stick. I'd rather, not do that again.
Right.
So.
And even with some of our really high functioning clients, we still suggest that they move out first, because if you think about the weeks of time that it takes to have an estate sale, get the donations gone, have the house cleaned, all those things have to happen after you're under contract. And as you know, there's still hiccups and repairs and all kinds of things after you go under contract. And if you're trying to deal with an estate sale and a move and donations and repairs and all of that, I mean,
trying to do it from someplace else, was really hard.
Right.
And you had a really amazing handyman on board with you, and the carpet guy was great. And I mean, you're a full service organization. So, I really appreciate all that you did, because I would have probably still been floundering around thinking about selling the house if you hadn't kind of like,
and we try not to be too pushy, but at the same time, we're trying to push you towards your goal of what you're doing.
And you spent 3 years hanging on to this house. So, it's kind of like, I felt like I owed it to you to let you sell it.
Well, is there, I really think that sharing your story and how real you are with everything has just really, I would hope, help a lot of other families, because I think a lot of people feel so alone in this. It's different. You only have one time, unless you're dealing with your husband's parents or something like that. It's just, it's not something that you have a lot of practice on, and not everybody, not all your peers are dealing with the same type of situation. So it's kind of,
and a lot of it, a lot of it depends on how your relationship is with your parent. I mean, the way we did it, it had to be that way for Mom, because she would have it would have really hurt her to know selling her house, because that was such a special house to her. And so I never, ever wanted to burst that bubble for her. And I just, if the person has a better relationship with their parent, or their parent is not that deep in dementia or Alzheimer's, that they can still, function. And I would say, have a lot of these conversations with them before they get really bad. Mom and I had some really good, serious ones about her expectations for, like, if she'd had a stroke, what did she want us to do, and things like that. Because when the time came, it was easy to make decisions, because I knew, and I had promised her, I'm not going to let him do this. I will do that. So I would say have those conversations. They're not pleasant sometimes, but have them while they're still fairly lucid and of mostly right mind, because
it's hard. Right. Even if you're doing the right thing, it's hard. And maybe your sisters that had a hard time with Mom saying, you're not my kid anymore, it would have been better if they knew, well, Mom in her right mind told me.
And that's what I tried to tell them, is this is not the woman that raised us.
No.
This is a woman, this is Mom's body, but the woman that's in there is not the woman that raised us. This is a sick woman. She has dementia. She's not the same. And that kind of like, as far as like when the end did come, I was more at peace with it, because I had pretty much said goodbye to my mom earlier.
Right.
As the time went on. And so I had already really kind of mourned my mom being gone. We had a service for her body, but she was pretty much a force. So she you couldn't what am I trying to say? You had to honor whatever it was, because you just felt like if you didn't, she'd come back and let you know.
Right. But I mean, you guys, I mean, I know it took a lot out of you and your brother too,
Yeah,
this journey, but I mean, it was
yeah.
all done.
I will say that anybody that is doing this, number one, especially if you're going after guardianship, I would say get a spiral notebook and write down everything, especially if you're doing business. My dad had investment accounts, I don't know how many different places, and I had to get them consolidated because you have to turn in a yearly financial report to the court. And if you've got 15 accounts, you've got to, account for every penny in every one of those accounts. And my lawyer was about to go crazy over all that. So she's like, we got to consolidate.
Right.
But so, and even though getting just control over some of the business, like, this account at the credit union or whatever, right? We did Randolph Brooks, and it was like, I had to have so many pieces of paper and documentation for this and documentation for that, in the stock companies and Schwab and places like that. So I got a notebook and I wrote down, when I called somebody, I wrote down the date, the time, the number I called, the options I used on the phone, who I talked to, what I asked them, what they told me, because you're going to need to go back and check that at some point.
Right.
I promise. It'll be there. And the other thing is also, I did find out the hard way. The first lawyer we started with he was just starting out, and I don't think he had a lot of practice. And he got the ball rolling and he got us started and got us into court and things, and got the guardianship in place. But I realized that he and I were not on the same page as far as paperwork and things like that. And so I ended up just saying, look, I don't think we're working well together. And I think both of us will be happier if you just give me your final bill and I'll move on.
Right.
I had already found another lawyer, but I realized that he was creating more aggravation than anything else. And I finally decided that I needed to. So I did find a different lawyer. So you're paying them money and they're working for you. So don't be afraid if your lawyer is giving you a runaround or you don't feel like you're communicating well and you tried to get them to, see your side of it and they don't. Find another lawyer. Life's too short.
And I agree. And I think I want to say too that I've seen people who maybe use their, the guy who lives across the street that's an attorney. Well, he's a family law attorney that mostly deals in divorces, right? And that's not this specific situation. Same thing with anything, whether we're talking about a mover, somebody to do an estate sale, the realtor piece of it as well. This isn't a time to, give a little business to the guy down the street that is starting out and that kind of thing. This is a hard move, as we've kind of heard from your situation, and you need people in place that are very experienced in exactly what you're doing. It's a different type of move. Like you mentioned with actual movers, it's a different type of home sale that's not just, hey, let's move you from 1,800 square feet up to your $3,000 dream house. It's just a completely different move. Yeah. So you have to have the right players in place. And I think with the elder law attorney, that's kind of what you saw, was they didn't have the expertise maybe that they needed. And then, like you said, the communication piece of it, you need to be able to communicate with everybody involved in this. It's already hard enough.
Right.
So.
Well, and then you specializing in those types of moves and you have all these resources, that was just invaluable. And because I would have not known, and not living in San Antonio was really difficult. And right. So the fact that, I whatever, God or whoever put us together that day, and I'm eternally grateful, because
right.
I don't think I could have done it any other way.
Well, I appreciate that. And you guys were just such a wonderful family to deal with. And your mother definitely played that beautiful little old lady sweet card to me too.
She did. She was, yes. And we kind of laughed as a send off. She had a wooden spoon that was her scepter. She ruled the family with it. So we sent her off with, we put one in the box with her. So,
well, good.
She may need it when she gets to wherever she's going, because I'm pretty sure she's got somebody to straighten up.
Right. Some rules to change around there.
That's right. So
well, good. Right. Well, I really appreciate you joining us, and it's been just an absolute pleasure. And I'm so glad we were able to reconnect, and hopefully this will be helpful to.
Yeah. Well, thank you for asking me. And if anybody has, if they start asking you more questions about things, I'll be glad to answer them, because I've got all this experience now and nothing to do with it.
Right. No, it's true. It's like I said, you're not going to go through that again with your mom again. So it's.
And my mom was the last parent. My husband's were already gone. And then Daddy just was unexpected. So she was the last parent. So I told my kids, I said, now you know what you got to do when I get to be old and cranky. You know how to deal with it.
Exactly. Even if I'm resisting, right?
Yeah, and my daughter just keeps telling me, I'll find you a really good nursing home mom.
Right. Yeah. Well, good. Well, thank you so much, Anne.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes.